Well, it seems that a white supremacist motivated terrorist attack happened in Christchurch, New Zealand, where two mosques were attacked, and there's even reports that there were IED car bombs involved. That they did not go off; they were diffused, but uh, from the reports, it sounds like these terrorists, these white supremacist terrorists, were armed up and armored up, as well as it sounds like they were using like a GoPro like camera to live stream uh, their uh, their attack, that their terrorist action, live streaming it onto Facebook. So you know, one of the only person that they mentioned was a white Australian who had a manifesto. Who had a manifesto sounding like the other nut jobs in the United States, and everywhere there's white people of Western uh, of Western descent, or think they are of Western descent. So, as I understand it, 40 people were killed between the two mosques, and an additional 20 people are in the hospital. Some of them in critical condition. All of them fighting. Uh, uh, it was interesting. I was watching. They're talking about the the host said, "Is it a wider problem? Is it a wider issue within the West?" And that's what didn't explicitly come out and say to the West, but that's what she was alluding to. And so I listened to the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and she stated, they're not racist, and they're free and open, and so on and so forth. But I have to push back on that because the Oaxacas of New Zealand, the Polynesian uh, indigenous descendants of New Zealand, which was taken over by white nation, white nationals. I mean, not nationals, but people from Europe, particularly the British. Just like what they did in Australia, and they did everywhere that they put that they have their fingerprint on. Uh, they committed. Them and their descendants have committed atrocities against the indigenous, just like they're doing in Puerto Rico and Guam and all the other territories, and what they did in Hawaii, what they continue to do to this day. And interesting enough, during the time the island of Puerto Rico, who are supposed to be American citizens, but continuously they continuously get brutalized financially, economically, politically, and physically. Mentally and emotionally, and the same thing with the American citizens and in Guam, and the American citizens of American Samoa, of the American Virgin Islands, um, just like how they did it in the Philippines after the Spanish American War. Um, just as they did, when the U.S. basically invaded Hawaii and brutalized and pillaged and raped. I mean, and the indigenous always pay for it, always, and continue to pay for it. The people that have been there for thousands of years, and they're the ones, in Hawaii right now. In Hawaii, the indigenous are being pushed out of the lands. Their rights are being the rights that they're supposed to be getting as American citizens. Not so much. Not so much. They don't so much have rights, which is typical. Which is typical. Um, you know, for all of Tulsi's for all of Tulsi's uh, you know, being from Hawaii and so on and so forth. Uh, you know, uh, under even with her representing this, uh, you know, uh, there are videos you can watch where you got the indigenous who are homeless and they're being and they're they can't even go to areas that are not populated, and they set up these they set up these rough camps and so on and so forth, and and you got the corporations and the Hawaiian government going around terrorizing these people, uh, sending in armed people to push them out, just like they do the homeless in the mainland U.S. Um, the indigenous in the mainland get treated the exact same way. Except they're supposed to have treaty and sovereignty. Except that's all a myth and fable because they don't have any sovereignty. The state and the federal the states that the indigenous who are supposed to have sovereignty uh, make the rules. The federal government makes the rules. They can't even prosecute criminals, and especially if it's a white person who commits a crime on their sovereign lands. And the same thing in Canada. The indigenous have sovereignty up there and treaties, but the Canadians don't follow that. Don't follow that. It's just a piece of paper, and it was just all lies. And so the Oaxacans in New Zealand uh, are getting the same crap over there. Uh, being indigenous people makes you basically less than second class citizens. uh, but that's the case. Black Americans know this, and brown Americans know this. Um, this is so. Yes, it is a systemic problem. It is a systemic issue. Yes, there is supremacy that's been going on. Has never stopped, and and the government and the government and business and the evil racist pigs uh, uh, have been oppressing and doing violence, uh, sanctioned by the government. Wherever the minorities and the indigenous reside in a white controlled country, and that's everywhere that Europeans have colonized. And even, the other thing about white European and white Western world, Western people is that not everybody in the white Western world is a racist, but there's a good portion. And when the British got control of Hong Kong, they uh, they brutalized the Chinese, and it was a war they started. It was a war of aggression they started with the Chinese. Uh, the same thing that happened in Korea, same thing that happened in Japan. The Europeans found them, and then looked at them. Oh, look at these primitives, and they always brutalize, always. Not all of them, but enough of them, and it's sanctioned by those in charge. You know, yeah, and so understand something. My name is Mark Mahan, and there's a reason my name is Mark Mahan, because I was adopted, and my parents are white. My mother's of Czechoslovakian ancestry. My father's Irish ancestry. Uh, Wonderful people. I love them to death, and um, they were our fantastic parents. I mean, you know, I'm gonna tell you that there are things that I disagree with my parents with, and there are things that I disapprove. But that's that's family dynamics. You're not gonna agree with each other always. But you know, for all that my parents are wonderful people, they kind of buy into the myth that that there's no real inequality, and there's no real oppression. Um, not to the degree that they should be really overly alarmed about it, because they are because they are because their morality and their ethics and principles should call for it. And so, but they do have they do have a tendency to kind of overlook that, like so many uh, white Americans, who are uh, good people, but they have a tendency to kind of shrug it off, or use the excuse, I can only do what I can in my own life, and that's a problem. That's a problem. It should be that no matter your skin color, whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're brown, and if you want to go use the old school red and yellow, whatever color scheme you want to paint, it shouldn't matter. The fundamental truth is that we all bleed red, and without blood being exposed to the air, our blood is has a bluish tint to it before it turns red from oxidation. We all have fears, the same fears, same sort of fears. We all feel pain. We all have mental stresses and emotional stresses. We share more in common than not. And I get outrage. I get outrage for others because it is self-enlightened to be outraged and angry for others because they are part of the community. They are part of the human community. They are part of the American community, the greater whole American community. And their lives have value because they are part of the community, because of what they can contribute. They may be the person that discovers a cure for cancer. They may be the person who discovers how to keep us healthy and happy. They may come up with a technology that evolves us in ways that we only dream of. They may discover how to travel out in space and go have a Star Trek future. There are so many things, and all of that contributes to us as a collective community. And I cannot condone, and I cannot stay silent when a fellow American, a fellow member of community, a fellow member of humanity, the collective humanity, is brutalized because of subjective and basically evil ideology. This idea of superiority. Look, we all have our own prejudice. We all have our own ideas about ourselves. I'm intelligent, but I'm not going to tell you that I'm the most intelligent person in the world. I'm not going to tell you I'm the most perfect person in the world because I plainly have flaws. Because that's because I'm human. Because I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly growing. And it's not a matter of empathy. It's not a matter of compassion. It's a matter of right and wrong. It is right to be empathetic. It is right to be compassionate. It is right to be inclusive. It is right to not give equality, but expect equality for each other. That should be the basis. To think outside of that and to say, oh no, because I have money, or because my skin tone, because of my skin tone, or because I am part of the majority, that I have a special exception, and that I am somehow better and more superior. That's not evolving. That's not growing. That's regressive. That's what keeps the status quo of hatred and anxiety and worry, and it's a circular thing, and it's a circular hamster wheel of thinking that goes nowhere. And the only thing you can do is try to spread that circular thing, thereby possibly taking away possibly taking away things that may impact you in a meaningful way, because that circularity wants to grow and grow and grow, but only in a physical way. You know, growing physically, wider and longer, but you never evolve. You never grow, and the only thing that keeps growing is this falsehood of superiority, the hatred, the anger. All of it is imaginary. That is evil. That is wrong, and that actually hurts you personally, and it hurts the wider community of people that think like you, because it will always come back like anything circular. It will always come back to bite you personally. Always, because when if you succeed, you have to find some. You will always look to find somebody else to victimize. You will always find something else to divert that ideology and that anger and that fantasy, because that's all you want. It's like being a drug addict. You take drugs, you get hooked on it. Your body's chemistry changes, and you need it, and you need it, and you need it, and you'll do it until it kills you, or you wake up and understand that what you've been doing as a drug addict is actually killing you. It's harming you. And that is what that sort of hatred leads everybody who thinks that way. I don't care if you look like me, or if you're black, or if you're brown, or whatever color you think you are, or whatever idea of class or race. And classism is the exact same thing. Classism is that same dynamic. You will always look to declass others, to make others less. Classism, racism are hand in hand. You will always be in contention. You will always be aggressive. You will always look to attack others. And that brings about insanity. Look at what the classism and racism in those in politics and official positions. They are constantly attacking and punching down. Why? Because that is what the base modus operandi of their classism and racism and their elitism dictates. It's an evil ideology, and it is self-destructive. It is a circle of predatory behavior that will always, because within predators is always a stronger predator. There's always a predator who's looking to prey upon you. That's what it is. You are at once the prey and the predator. And we don't hear much about New Zealand, the the radical uh, racism and violence is a disease. It spreads, and one thing about when you think in an elitist term, when you think in a classist term, when you think in all these evil ideologies of right wing or fascism, however you want, violence becomes violence. Violence becomes the core thinking, and it makes you insane because you even discount your family, your friends, your loved ones, because they get less. There's less and less value placed on them. I mean, just look at what the college scam proves. You got all these wealthy people with classist, elitist thinking, and they haven't even considered the welfare of of their children. They've providing them with false material, material and mythical, mythical achievements. When they're faced with something that's real, they won't be able to handle it. All they have is that mythology. It's a lie. Myth is a lie. Fantasy is a lie. That's why we call it mythology. That's why we call it fantasy. Because it has no basis in reality. All right. I really went way overboard here. All right. Thanks for your time.